Meet Smarty, the easiest to implement and most accurate address intelligence suite on the planet, offering you the #1 address verification service that securely processes billions of addresses daily. Easily integrate Smarty's reliable API to efficiently clean data, lower shipping costs, and ensure top-notch user experiences, all with legendary free support. See for yourself why people are simply bananas for Smarty.
Today's webinar is about dealing with address data from multiple countries. So our presenter today, we have Jeffrey Duncan, our technical product manager with us today. And we're really excited to hear what you have to share. So without further ado, Jeffrey.
I wonder what further ado would have sounded like, but I'll get started. I have been working here at Smarty for 13 years, going on getting closer to 14 years. I didn't expect to be working with addresses. I did not go to high school or college with the hopes of working with addresses and solving international address problems, but here I am and I enjoy it. I am the type of person that likes solving problems, and addresses constantly present us with problems. If you have ever given a presentation like this or a webinar, you might be familiar with talking to a dead screen where you can't see anyone. I guarantee this will be much more intriguing or interesting for you if you ask questions. And even though it says questions are at the end here, any questions, please ask questions throughout. I'm actually going to be presenting some of my own questions, ones that I've gotten from people, and I'll be answering them. First off, addresses are hard. So let's just start with your country of origin or where you're currently living. I live in the United States, and addresses are complicated here. For the most part, addresses begin with a primary number and then have a street type, a city, state, and a zip code. Let's jump in here. But that doesn't always make sense, it's not always the case, or it's not always easy to understand. Look at this one at the bottom. New York, New York, New York, USA. If someone were to submit that, first of all, if I were to look at that, I would just throw it out. That's not an address. That doesn't even count. Well, we have to work with that. It's still an address. The client still put it in. For some reason, they think that it's an address, so let's pretend it's an address and work with it. I'll get to that one later, but it really is an address. There is a 1 New York Boulevard in New York, New York, and it has a zip code. So that's a valid address. In the United States, we also have P.O. boxes, we have military addresses, we have rural routes. There's probably about 10 different address format styles in the United States. Again, those are pretty common to me. As I've grown up, I've seen those different types and I've used them as I've mailed things out or driven places. I've only lived in a few countries in my life, 3 or 4. And so some of those countries are familiar to me, others not so much. I have lived in Germany, so those addresses make sense. Look at this bottom one, Heine Strabe, S-T-R-A, looks like a weird B, 20-86161. What does that even mean? Well, if you look below it, Heine Strasse, Strasse. Well, I was born in Germany, so I know that top one is just a different way to represent the double S. It's called an S set. So Heine Strasse, number 20-86161. I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce the next one up in Hong Kong. And then you have, and then you have this address in Great Britain. So in the United States, jumping down again, we have an address line and then a city-state zip line on the bottom. This address in Great Britain has 5 address lines, and some addresses in Ireland and in India have 5, 6, 7, 8 address lines. It doesn't even make sense to me in the United States. But that's what we've got. So addresses are hard and they're not getting easier. Smarty is here to try and make sense of those complicated addresses for you so that you can get straight to work in what you already do. So addresses are hard.
Jeffrey, really quickly, a question has come in your opinion. I think this is going to be an opinion question. What is the best database character set to store addresses? Like the German address that you showed with like the weird B. What is the best character set for storing your addresses?
UTF-8. Definitely use UTF-8.
Excellent.
That's a quick answer. UTF-8 is the encoding or the character set that we utilize to make sure we can handle all of the characters that come in, from Hangul characters to characters in Japanese. Every character that's represented so far on the modern internet can be encapsulated within UTF-8.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. Good question. So understanding address formats, I hinted on that a little bit. I'm looking at the different ways the addresses are put together. I'm going to jump back to that previous screen. This New York one, even though it looks funny, it is still a valid address. One, in this case, would be the house number, New York, USA. We have in the US, we have the primary number first, and then the street type, and then the city, state, and zip code. Look at this one in Germany, Heinestrasse, number 20. In Germany, they use the house number second. So you have the street first, and then the house number, and then the city zip code, and then the city. So it doesn't even fit if I'm trying to represent an international or a German address using a US format. Completely lost. Does not work at all. And then this top one in Great Britain, all bets are off. Australia, New Zealand, same thing. All bets are off on those. So address formatting, the order that the address components should be put in, it's different for different countries. I would boil it down to say there's about 25. If you sum it up, there's about 25 broad address formats across the globe, and then there's nuances within that, especially handling things like apartment number. Where does the apartment number go? And in Canada, you put the apartment number first and then the house number. So 20 and then 100 Main Street. That's totally different from the United States. In the United States, we put the apartment last. In Australia, you can put the apartment first or you can put it last. So many different ones. We already got the unique characters and languages. Addresses come in different languages. They're not all Roman-based or Latin-based characters. And you have some countries that do both Roman characters and native characters. In Japan, they use a native character set, and they accept Roman characters because a lot of their business deals with countries that have languages based on the Roman character set. So it's important to be able to accept those, or at least not reject addresses that come in a character set that you're not used to, or in a language that you're not used to. Back to this first one, Hong Kong, that middle address there with a lot of squiggly lines and dead earthworms on it. I don't recognize any of those things except for 4 of the digits, 4 of the numbers there. But the postal service in Hong Kong can deliver there. And Smarty can help you determine that this address is different than another one that to me looks exactly the same. So understanding those addresses, that's what we do. The address standardization process.
Before you dive into this one,
sure.
We have a couple of questions on here. So international addresses are, oh, my microphone just fell down on my lap. Okay. International addresses are always fun to work with, but each country has their own address formats and styles. But does Smarty have any plans to send standardized state or region name code in accordance with ISO standards?
Good question. Yes and no. So when we started this process, we were just returning the very bare minimum that you need to make to have an address. As we've been doing the international addresses for the last 9 years, we've had more and more people ask for different fields. Hey, can you give us the country name? Can you give us what's called the endonym, the internal country name, instead of the exonym, the external country name? For example, external would be Germany, internal would be Deutschland. We've had people ask for that. And then the city and states do have an ISO standardized format or an ISO code for those. We don't return those yet, but on our side, it's not hard to do. We just have not decided to do that yet. So good question. I'll make a note of that. It isn't hard to do. there's just other nuances with it.
Sure, sure. There's another question kind of goes along this. Can Smarty recognize an address with a unit number, city and province, and maybe a postal code? So, for example, let's say the street is missing. You only have the unit number, the city, province, and postal code. Uh, are we able to recognize an address, or maybe even just deliver a list of addresses that meet those standards? And a use case here is we receive sales reports from our distributors and they forget to mention different parts all the time.
Sure. The answer is yes. And there's two different ways to handle that. The first way would be with our autocomplete tool. Autocomplete is designed to be used in real time. So it's as you're typing an address in, we are suggesting, we're making suggestions for you. Because we're interacting with you in real time, we can propose things that would normally be thrown out because it's too much of a reach, right? You type in the letter F, we could provide 10 different street names for that. Whereas if you're using our street address if you're using our address validation tool, which takes one input, processes it, and gives you back just the best possible match for that, it's not able to provide all these other ones that you might use. So, for example, in Great Britain, if you using the autocomplete, if you enter just an 8, you'll start getting results immediately. The more you enter, the more filtered down the results get and gets focused on what you're looking for. With the International Street Address API, or our street address service in Great Britain, you can put in just a house number and a postal code and find the address. So in some countries where the data is that good, we can do that.
Excellent. And you might be getting more into this later in your presentation.
Oh, sure.
But one more question, and if you're going to talk about it later, just say so. Does Smarty provide a tool in which a country could be provided and the correct standardized format could be returned? Basically, a way to quickly see the pieces of the address puzzle in the correct format by country. This could really help with dynamic input or display layout. I guess essentially saying, here's an address, and if I'm viewing it in this country, how does it parse?
How should it be formatted?
Right.
Okay, cool. So our service by default return the formatted address as well as the components that you would use that we use to make up that address, and we return what I call the recipe, how that address is structured. So for a given address, we will return in the recipe. It'll say primary number. It'll say a primary number space, street name space, street suffix space, new line, country or city, state, zip code. So we do have that. We return it already. If you're looking for an index or a document that shows all the possible formats for the different countries, it's coming soon. We've already got it finished. We're just rolling it out.
Sneak peek.
Sneak peek. Oh, yeah,
all right.
Sneak peek.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move forward. Address standardization process. Oh, this is the nerd stuff, and I could talk for hours on this. I'll try and get really try to go real quick on it, but not miss anything out or not miss out on anything. In order to make sense of an address, we have to know what the pieces are that's coming in. So we know our system knows a whole lot about a lot of addresses from different countries. When you submit an address, whether it's in a single line, we call that free form, or whether it's in multiple lines, we will attempt to understand first, what did you mean? So we clean that up as much as we can. We match the component types or the pieces of the address, and then we run that against our system, which has a whole lot of algorithms and scoring processes inside it to not return a false positive, but to return the best match possible. So we understand the address, make a match, return it to you, and then you can do the next step, which I have listed here, is deduplicating, if you're interested. Deduplicating cannot be done without some understanding of the addresses, and it also can't be done without first standardizing the addresses so that 100 main streets with street spelled out, or let's go back to this one, Heinestrasse with that S set on it, and Heinestrasse with the SS, the double S spelled out. Those are both the same address. In fact, as I'll show you a little bit later, this one will get trimmed down to even HEINESTR period. So it's abbreviated. So Heinestrasse, number 20. Both of those addresses are the same. They're just different representations for the same address. So we standardize those. The output would be identical. You can then deduplicate. Let me move on unless there's other questions. So that was the standardization process. If you just throw that into ChatGPT, you can probably create a company that competes with us real fast. Or maybe there's more. Business benefits of proper validation. Boy, I used to work with a company and we shipped things all the time. We shipped woodworking tools, both internationally and domestic here in the US. And with a US address, if I ship out a drill and it doesn't get to someone's place, it gets returned to us, I've got multiple problems. First of all, the customer is now mad because he didn't get the tool that he paid for. He might do a chargeback and dispute it with his bank. He might leave me a bad review. He might say, yeah, sorry, I gave you the wrong address. Please ship it again. But he's definitely not willing to pay for the shipping again. So I have to ship it again. Maybe I already have the original product back. Maybe it's still lost in transit. It hasn't gotten back yet. Now I have, instead of 3 or 4 days to get the product to the customer, it took 2 weeks to get the product to the customer. I've paid for the shipping both ways. I have to track down that item that I shipped out. Customer decided he doesn't like iService because he put it in the wrong address and I shipped it to the wrong address that he gave me. I lose every time. There's no instance where I can win if a customer gives me a bad address. That's it. And it doesn't work to point the blame at them, even if it's their fault. So what can I do? Autocomplete. Check the address as it's coming in. While the person is in your store or on the website and the shopping cart, check their address so that you don't have any of those problems. If they type in an address that doesn't exist or that we can't match, you can decide whether you're going to accept that or you can reject it. Our system or the address validation will allow you to know with pretty high confidence whether that package or that whatever you're shipping out will get there or not. That is huge as far as cost savings. I didn't even mention the time. You have a salesperson or a customer success manager on the phone with that angry client, and then they'd have to go to the kitchen and get a drink because they need some downtime after talking to the angry client. It just adds up. A bad shipment, which could have been resolved with autocomplete or address verification. So that's kind of the problems that come with using the wrong address. Let's see, I had a note here for better data quality for analysis. If your business is not in shipping, if your business is in, I don't know, logistics or travel or sending a truck or sending a person out to do a repair at a house, all of that information revolves around an address. If your business is just data and you have millions and millions of addresses coming in related to different people and you need to deduplicate those, you need to understand where your clients are, you need to understand where the people that you're working with are located. After you've standardized or validated the address, you can then get a geocode, which we provide. The geocode is the latitude and longitude coordinates for that address. You can plot that on a map. If a school district, for example, is trying to optimize their bus routes, knowing that most of the students live across the river in a certain section of town means they can decide how many buses to send there and minimize the amount of time that the students are on buses, or make sure that the parents don't have to drive the kids because there weren't enough buses. So there are a lot of business benefits and opportunities that come from having good address data. It's easy to talk about what happens if you have bad data, but once the bad data is eliminated, you don't have to worry about it and you can focus on doing what you do best. The reason you have business in the first place. Any questions on that?
I don't know about on that.
Oh, sure.
But there is a question here.
I have no problem jumping around.
Okay. Can Smarty break addresses into different columns if the whole address is mentioned in one single field? So in this case, data, the commas and spaces are very different. So Excel doesn't provide a solution to break it down into street, city, province, postal code, simply.
Yeah. It sounded like you were talking about whether you can enter an address in a free form or a single line. So 100 Main Street, New York, New York, 10010, all in one line. Or let's say it has commas in there or pipes or anything. Even if many of the words are munged together with no spaces in there, yes, our system, because we try to match what you intended, based on what you gave us, we will be able to break down those pieces into what we call the components, the address components, or the atomic, at the atomic level. Here's this primary number, here's a street, pre-directional, post-directional, suffix, all of those. Yes, we do return those. And you're right, Excel does not do that because it's not just a simple equation. There has to be some dictionaries involved and some knowledge.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I will move forward. Using an address validation service. I've already touched on this a little bit, but let me look at the challenges of building in-house expertise. Perfect. If you go to Stack Exchange or Stack Overflow and ask, how can I parse an address? How can I do address validation on my own? We'll skip the validation because that requires a master, an authoritative source. But the parsing itself, numerous people have answered that question. In fact, some employees from Smarty have answered that question on Stack Exchange. In order to parse the components of an address, you can get really close. You can get to like 60 or 70% with just a multiple page long regex. I mean, if that sounds fun to you, just realize that'll get you to 60 or 70%. So regex is not the way to do it. If you want to, and that's just for one country. If you're just doing Germany, you can figure out, here are the 10 standard address formats in Germany with exceptions, and handle those all, and your regex gets longer and longer. But still, all you're doing is guessing. This looks like the street name. I'm going to call it the street name. And if the house number has another number behind it, is that an apartment? I don't know. So all you can do is guess if you're just using a static calculation like that. If you want to get someone assigned from your company to each country that you work with, well, that's cool. You can grow your business and have lots of employees that are just doing address validation for you. And that's what we do. So you can do that if you want to. It's not easy. You have to acquire the data. You have to make sure the data gets updated. If that's your business, then I guess we'll see you as a competitor at the trade shows. But if it's not your business, let Smarty do it, because we do that really well. Any questions so far?
Not questions.
Okay.
So, in regards to my previous question of how address data is impacting people, I'm curious for some of your thoughts on this. So, one person says, we're a trade union with 3,000 members living all over the world. Correct address data is vitally important when conducting mail-in officer selections.
Okay.
Or officer elections. I'm sorry. Another one, business case. Distributors are sending sales reports with different addresses for the same customer. So it makes it difficult to analyze by store sales. I believe the distributor does not have a better customer master setup, and the street address changes all the time and sometimes is missing.
Okay.
Another one, how, let's see, international addresses are a pain, especially the country of India. Those addresses are long, and even though USPS will send out the package, the country will flag it and stop the package, making it very difficult to get it moved to the client. They say about 50% of their India shipments get stuck. It's very high.
Yeah, let me see if I can go in reverse order. International addresses are a pain. Addresses in India are a pain. They're not going to get better anytime really soon. We had a colleague that worked here with us. He was from India, and his suggestion was just don't bother with India. Wow. So the only way to get something there is put as much information as you can, validate as much as you can, leave the rest on there, and the local, the the last mail carrier will do what they can do to get it there. India is tough. China is also tough. Both of those are being improved. There's some projects internal to those countries to improve the address data. As far as mailing something out and dealing with duplicate addresses or duplicate variations of the same address, let me use the example of a college or a university. Universities get thousands of applications every year from students, and actually tens of thousands. And usually they send out a registration packet to those students. If that packet doesn't get there because the address was entered wrong, then it comes back. Possibly that student won't come to that school. They may go elsewhere. They'll send it again. And having a bad address means they're going to keep sending to that address until they decide, hey, based on the fact that we've gotten these packages back 10 times, we're no longer accepting this address. Or as many universities do, they'll just keep sending it. A lot of times the advertising money just increases and you have dead letters and there's so many that nobody can handle them. So they just throw them away or recycle them and it never gets fixed. That can be resolved very quickly. First, you can eliminate addresses that are not going to be delivered, and you can deduplicate so you don't send 20 registration packets to the same person. So many business solutions. And what we generally suggest is if you're hesitant at all, if you don't know how much address validation can help your business, send us a list. Just send us a list. Don't put people's names on it because we don't need that. Just talk to our sales team and send a list of 1,000 addresses that you use, for example. And we're happy to run that for you and give you the analysis and say, hey, 78% of these are perfectly deliverable. Some of these, 10% needed spelling corrections, 18% are just not deliverable. If that kind of number for you would be useful, we're happy to do it. And then if it does prove useful to you, sign up, start using our service. Jump to the next slide.
Awesome.
Best practices and the way forward. So a lot of people ask, how should we format the address input on our website? Do we format it in a generic way like Amazon does? I don't know. Are they good enough to follow? Who knows? Do we just have address 1, address 2, and use the generic postal code instead of zip code? Or do we take the address and accept the address all in one line? Or do we create 45 or 150 different web forms based on the localization or based on the country where the address is coming from, or the IP address where the person is logged in from, or the country that they have specified? Whew, all of those can be done. I don't know that there is a best way other than ask for the country first. Get the country first, because if you want to change the format, you can. Most websites that I've seen in the last 25 years ask for the country last, which means they've already gotten all the address information, possibly in the wrong fields, and then they ask for the country. So if you ask for the country first, it reduces all the problems going forward. I know it's kind of awkward, but it is the best thing to do, to ask for the country first. And I would recommend, or we recommend, using a single address input field. Just call it address field. Apply autocomplete onto that. So as soon as they start typing, they can see the results immediately. And then if there's any problems, if the customer's hanging out too long on that page, doesn't type something in, you can give them a second input, which is the kind of the way that things look like on an address. So that's a good way to do it. Feel free to ask us more questions about that. A lot of studies have been done on how to do the address input forms on a website. I mentioned Amazon because they're kind of big in the United States, but they have chosen a generic way to do it. And let's see, common questions. I had a few. I had about 30 common questions, but let me hit
We've gone
one.
through a lot of these.
Yeah, let me hit a couple of them real quick. How many countries do we cover? All of them. How does their accuracy vary? Vary.
I mean, you brought up India just a second ago.
Sure. On our website, we have a list of all the countries that we cover, and we have the two different accuracy levels. We have an address precision or address accuracy, and then we have a geocode accuracy. Usually they're the same. Delivery point is the best accuracy that we have. That means that the address, that means we know that the delivery point or that structure exists or that apartment exists, and it's a real address. So they're not all countries are the same. They're getting better, but it's a slow process. Is it as fast as our US address validation? Not quite as fast. So US address validation is ridiculously fast. Try us out if you want to know what ridiculous speeds look like. The international address validation is pretty darn fast. It's faster than, we haven't had any clients complain about the speed of the international. It is a little bit slower because there's a lot more data to go through. Andrew, do you have any questions?
Yeah, what are you going to do for lunch? Just kidding. You don't have to answer that.
I thought you were going to ask what kind of shampoo I use.
What shampoo do you use?
Whatever's in the shower.
No, so these are all questions that can be answered. If you ever go to our website in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little chat bubble. You can chat into our support team, and they're happy to answer questions, including questions like these. And because of time, we'll skip this one. I do have so if you guys want to try out our international tools, there's a demo, an API demo, as well as an autocomplete demo available on our site. Just go to smarty.com, and at the top under tools, you can find the international tools, and you can select any of those, try them out. You can get a free account and even plug the API into your system and try it there. It won't charge you. It'll just, once you've used up your free lookups, it will just stop delivering. So it's not a dangerous trial. I hate it when I get the dangerous trials where the trial was for 10 and you did 100. We're going to charge you now.
And we're not taking your credit card in advance before you try it.
We're not doing that biz. But yeah, you can try it out. You can try out the US stuff. You can try out the international stuff. Right here where Jeffrey's showing, there's an international tab you can select, and then just like he suggested, it'll ask for your country first and then move you on through.
And then you can also do it free form. So we've got this here, country first, or I'll just do a sample. So country first there, and then here's the input all in one line, and then we return it in the various components. So here's the locality, postal code, premise, which is house number. So we do return all that in the various components.
It's all right there for you to play with. So thanks everyone for joining. There are several questions that I'm going to take. I'm not in any rush. If you guys need to leave, you're welcome to. If you don't want to hear these questions answered, again, we'll get the recording sent out to you. Do you have a tool or API to try to synchronize addresses across two databases that cannot be integrated? For example, trying to validate that a given customer address matches in two systems, where one is 123 N Main and the other is 123 North Main.
Yes, absolutely. That's the benefit of standardizing an address. So let's just look at this one. I'll go with the US because I'm much more familiar with that. Let's see. Here's an address, 1224 South 760 West. Now notice that there's an autocomplete result that's coming up as I type. If you're using it interactively, that's easy to do. We'll fill that in. These are Utah addresses. So that one resolves over here to 1224S 760W. If I change it to 1224S OUT South and West, it will still resolve to the same thing. So standardizations like that, you can't know that it's the same address until you standardize it.
It's worth it noting there the little yellow exclamation point that says, we standardize the abbreviation. So if we end up changing any part of the address, you're going to know.
Yep.
None of this. I don't know if it matched, or I don't know what was changed, what was wrong about the previous address.
This one actually works without even the South or the West.
Oh, cool. So now it just says we added street suffix or directional.
Yep.
That's very cool. Okay, other question. Do we need to fill in all fields in the input template? Will Smarty be able to read the address when one or other column data is not available?
Cool. Let's look at that. So I'm using a form here, but if you're talking about a column like a spreadsheet, that's the same thing. So again, 1224 South, 760. I'm not using the autocomplete. We got a zip code 84601. So I did not fill in city or state. The results are we added the city and state, Provo, Utah, based on that zip code.
Mm.
So,
And vice versa. Let's say you
and
just
vice
have
versa.
state.
Yeah. Just state. I don't believe it works with just state.
Well,
let's try. City.
Prove it.
Actually, this field, let's switch over to one that will let me do that. The JavaScript on that previous page doesn't allow it.
Mm.
But let's see, 1224 South.
This is a sample
West.
of the API data that you get.
Yep. So now I'm just doing the street address and the state of Utah. Let's see, 1224 South. Looks like it found it. So looking for just that one in Utah.
Remember when you said you couldn't find it and then you found it?
Yeah, if it works.
That was fun. Great. I hope that answers your question. And then the last question here, how well can Smarty handle address validation and formatting in countries like, and then they list several countries. So essentially, where can we find the quality of the data across multiple countries?
Okay, so I'm going to my resources up here and then documentation. I'm going to go to Cloud API reference, and over on the left, I'll see international street address API. Within that, there's a field that says supported countries, or a link. These are all the countries that we support, and as I mentioned, the address precision and the geocode precision. In the country of Afghanistan, we have data that goes to the locality, which means the city. So the best we can verify for you, if you give us an address that's 100 Main Street in a city and state in Afghanistan, we'll only be able to confirm the city and state.
What's it look like in Ecuador?
In Ecuador. So everything's on here. You're welcome to look through it. In Ecuador, we have delivery point so we can get down to the apartment number for the address. The geocode is only the building. We don't have geocodes for the apartment number. Alderaan, because you asked, it's actually no longer available. Sorry.
Awesome. All right. Well, great. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thanks everybody for joining. I hope that you got what you wanted. We had a lot of questions, so I think people hopefully had they got a benefit from this that they were hoping to get from them. Again, go and visit smarty.com. Try it out for yourself if you haven't already, and we'll see you guys next time.